Good evening, everyone, and happy Tuesday. I am very happy and excited to welcome my guest this evening, Corey Jones with Safeyman Consulting, former Mount Laurel Police Department officer, 15 years on the SWAT team, and now he's got his own consulting business doing de-escalation and active shooter training and concealed carry training and all the important things that we need to be safe today. Welcome to the show, Corey.
You know, top Dog Tag Diva, thank you so much for inviting me on. I'm so excited to be here and talk about, safety, security, and survival, and all the things that I find important. So, let's just ask away. I'm ready to go.
Well, I do think it's kind of funny that we're finally meeting, in this environment because we used to both have TV shows on an old station back in New Jersey. And, now we've kind of, here we are together. And like you
Yeah.
said, I'm talking about all the important things. So, to start off with, so you were a police officer with over 27 years. What made you want to be a police officer?
I get often asked this question. There are two main influences in that. My cousin, who's a retired New Jersey State Trooper, he was kind of like a big brother to me. I didn't understand this concept then. You know how you are when you're 20, 21. But
Right.
he turned out to be a mentor. He explained a lot about what police and state police did. And then my uncle, my brother's godfather, we had a very close family growing up. He was a police officer in Philadelphia for 31 years, from 1961 to 1991. He was in both of the move confrontations, if you remember them going way back, and
Yeah.
just the stories that he would tell me. And policing, and we could probably talk about this a little bit later, but policing took a different turn. It's different in 2025 than obviously it was in 1991 and 1961, 91, or 93 when I wound up getting hired.
Wow. Yeah. No, I completely believe that. And that's just how I know I'm getting older because I've been a nurse for 28 years now. And I'm like, I didn't do these things when I first became a nurse. And it's so different.
Yeah,
So I imagine that it's vastly different as, things have changed over the years. And I've always, I actually grew up in Mount Laurel myself. And I've always had a lot of respect for police officers. And I'm going to admit that I'm totally addicted to, TV show on Discovery TV. It's body cam. It's all body cam footage from cops like all over the country. And I'm totally
yeah,
addicted to this show. And I do find it fascinating and actually never realized how dangerous just traffic stops could be. And
yeah.
just like what an eye-opening experience. Like it could just turn, like you think it's just a routine traffic stop and it could just turn on a dime and be just really dangerous. So it's really opened my eyes. And I do enjoy what, like, for some reason there's a lot of them that are in Florida. I don't know what's going on down here, but I do
Yeah,
enjoy there is some crazy shit going on down here in Florida, I'll be totally honest.
I don't doubt it. And it's funny you bring that up, both those police shows and then Florida, because maybe a trivia question, maybe not, but the very first season of Cops was filmed in Broward County, Florida, was the
I did
very first one.
I did not know
Yeah.
that. That is an
And
interesting piece of trivia.
I watched it live. I was so excited. I wound up watching it live. I could not wait to be able to watch that. And even then, when you look at that episode, you couldn't air it today.
Yeah, it's just I just have a lot of respect for all of our policemen and policewomen out there, and what a tremendous job that you, in and of itself, and how the climate has changed over the last many years that I personally just don't understand. But what was the impetus for like leaving the police force and starting your consulting business?
Well, New Jersey, with the pension system, you do 25 years, and the salary that you make versus your pension contributions at 25 years, it becomes that flexion point where it breaks even. And if you stayed any longer, you're almost working for free. So
Mm,
it's almost guaranteed with every law enforcement officer in New Jersey, at least under my contract then, you were tied to 25 years on the job. Nowadays, they moved it up to 30 years that officers have to serve before they get that same pension benefits equation. But that's pretty much what it was. It was, I couldn't have stayed if I really wanted to.
right. So, and that makes total sense. And I'm, a piece of you must have been saying to yourself, like, I've made it this long. I haven't got injured. It's time. Let's, it's called a day.
You're exactly right. I mean, it's kind of like you see that prize at the end of the journey,
Right.
and you literally start counting down after around about 3 years to go. So back in like 2015, since I retired in 2018, I was with my then girlfriend, now wife. I really just started saying, all right, yeah, I gotta get out of this profession, find another profession where I'm home more with her. I started initially working from home with some traveling, and it was just better because my wife has two young boys who are my beautiful stepsons now, and I just love spending time with the family, spending time with them, being around crazy things. Never played soccer a day in my life, and my kids, who were only 2 years apart, decided they wanted to play recreational soccer, and they needed parents to coach. Well, I said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and coach, not knowing soccer, but I was able to help the team win two championships in a row. And I don't attribute that to my soccer skills because I never played soccer before. But when they were just, 10 or 10 and 12, I was able to use sergeant skills to be able to get that team at that age to do what I need them to do because I had no idea I didn't know what offsides was until, 5 games into the season. I'm probably embarrassing myself here, but I'm an honest guy.
No, I played soccer for years and years, and when my son was little, I coached the team, and I was like,
Mhm.
"Oh, I gotta." They're like 4 and 5. I need to dial it back a little, dial back the
Yeah,
intensity just a little
yeah,
bit.
yeah.
I'm a little competitive, but so when all the years in the police force, one of the things that I think is really impressive is that you never had any violations against you. Like, is that a common thing in the world in law enforcement, or is that not so common?
Well, first off, that's not entirely accurate. I did have some brushes with discipline.
Okay.
However, there's two types of discipline I say in law enforcement. There's making a mistake, however, you are driving towards a legitimate, righteous, legal, safe, tactical goal. You just made a mistake. Those are forgivable. While you may be subject to some sort of discipline, like, a written reprimand or a day off or something like that. At no point did I ever notoriously or egregiously do something against policy, against the law, or that was really immoral. So, those basic 25 years of driving fast, working on midnights, working on low sleep, chasing unpredictable bad guys who, as we came closer to 2000, 14 seminal event with Ferguson, 2020 seminal event with George Floyd. Although I was tired by then, retired by then,
Right.
you it just almost made it impossible for you not to get complaints against you. But yeah, you're right. When I retired, I believe, with the great respect of my agency, my coworkers, and the public at large.
Yeah, that's real. I think that's really, like you said, amazing considering like the climate that's has seemed to evolved. And again, I'm still in that. I just don't understand where that's coming from, and part of me feels that that's because of my nursing background, and I just, I'm a natural nurturer and carer, and I always want to see the good in people, but there's a lot of bad that goes on out there,
Hmm.
and um, I think it's just, it's testament to the human spirit for like healthcare and law enforcement. And we stay in it despite all the shit that we see and gets thrown at us. And even today now, there's a big movement in like, there's trying to protect ourselves because there is a violence against healthcare workers is on the rise. And,
Exactly.
every hospital system's got their version of, how to keep our, how we keep ourselves safe. And that's all well and good. But at the end of the day, if somebody comes at me, I'm swinging.
Well, yeah, you got to protect yourself, and this will probably lead us into a somewhat vigorous discussion. Is the public doesn't understand the lead up to where there's an assault or violence or an abuse of a public servant or a first responder, which I include you and I both in that family. We have to stop that before before it launches. We have to stop that before it starts, and being able to read people, draw on your experience and your training and your skills and your ability while knowing the law gives you a really good edge. The opposite would be just reacting out of emotion only, or even just logic only, and not being able to have tactical empathy and put yourself in that person's shoes in this exact type of situation. You don't learn how to anticipate that, how to mitigate that, how to de-escalate that to keep both yourself, the public, your team around you, and the individual themselves safe.
Yeah, I know. We had an it wasn't my patient. I'm only practicing at the bedside once a month now, but I get the incident reports for several departments that I cover. And there was an incident in the hospital where I work, where a patient, a mother was getting agitated and was screaming, yelling, cursing, and at one point like threatens to stab the nurse. And I'm like, this is crazy. Like,
Yeah.
and she was escorted off the property and things, and then immediately went across the street to a different hospital. I'm like, great, now she's just going to go perpetuate this at some other hospital. But there's just and then there was the story recently here in Florida on the East Coast. A nurse was attacked by a patient, and there was another ICU where a gentleman walked in with a gun and started shooting up the ICU. And it's like, oh, okay, what? They don't let us, I'm in Florida where I'm allowed to carry, but I can't carry my gun into the hospital. I'm like, but what if somebody brings one in, like that? I'm just kind of a sitting duck.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And, that brings me to one of the things that I like to teach is that teamwork, that having an well, you say an all-encompassing plan. Obviously, we can't predict the future. And a lot of people use, I hate to take a military term, but
Right.
asymmetric abilities to go ahead and make an attack or some sort of disruption. And we're still trying to figure out why. I know the Secret Service and FBI did a joint study on the pre-event indicators and motivation for active shooters. And there's a lot of good information in those two in that joint study that they did. I'm sorry that happened to you, and I'm sorry that makes you have a little bit of fear or trepidation going into work. But I also think that situational awareness is a good thing, and the fact that your head's not in the sand, you are not naive, and you may not be representing 100% of healthcare workers or humans or professional first responders, but just keep doing that. Keep your head up, on a swivel, and try to train your teamwork, your administration in the most diplomatic way possible to keep yourselves and everybody else safe.
Yeah, I think that it's a really important topic, and we've been talking about this for a few years. We even in the military, I'm a reservist, and every year we do this active shooter training. It's the same thing: run, hide, fight.
Mhm.
And we don't actually practice that necessarily in the hospital. And I think that's like you said, keep your head on a swivel. Like I'm in the military. I was deployed to Afghanistan in 2015, so I'm always on a swivel, which sometimes isn't always a good thing. I think is I'm a little more heightened than most,
Mhm.
but it's really important. But even in those like once a month when I'm doing that shift and I'm in the intensive care unit and patients are sick and they're critical and families and it's very easy to get distracted and miss a cue, and then all of a sudden things are out of control.
Yeah, then it's sideways. Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, your service continues to be important to me, and definitely my family and I are great, great supporters of the military. In fact, my eldest son has decided he's going to go into the Air Force. He's looking to go down the either drone or air traffic controller pathway. So I'm
Nice.
really, really, really proud of him. I think he's going to be able to call his future. Having gotten a 1400 on the SATs, I
Wow.
think he'll also do pretty well on the ASVAB.
Yep.
So he went and talked to some people at JBMDL. He got to sit in the ATC simulator, and he was super
Wow.
excited. On the way home, he said, "I already went on Amazon and I ordered ASVAB for dummies." I said, "Well, do they have an ASVAB for smart kids?
No,
Because it may be wasting your time." So, my father's a veteran. He served on an aircraft carrier. Quick
nice.
story. One of the most proud things that I can tell is that my dad was on the USS Hornet back in the late 70s when Gordon Cooper, who was the first American astronaut to spend 24 hours in space. When his capsule splash landed out in the Pacific, my dad's carrier picked him up. The capsule came on the carrier. The astronaut came on the carrier. And my dad, he had the best job in the Navy. He was in the band. He was a drummer. So they played.
That's awesome.
Yeah, right. They got to play a state concert for Gordon Cooper and his crew. So it's in his crew's book. It's just one of the things I'm the most proud of.
That is so cool. That is a really cool story.
Yeah.
We're actually going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about safety with rideshare drivers, de-escalation techniques, and active shooter.
All right.
It's the guts and it's the glory. 100 stripes, 100 stories. It's the Pledge of Allegiance on the 4th of July. It's them handwritten letters from home. It's them sleepless nights alone. It's his newborn baby he left with his wife. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, lay down, here's a line. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, for these stars and stripes, hey. From the fields of Indiana to the swamps of Louisiana to the golden coast of California, Uncle Sam's the only family he's got. His purple heartbeat won't stop, and his 18th birthday was the day he was born. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, lay down, here's the line. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, for these stars and stripes. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, stand on the front line. Proud but torn, but if you knew him you would understand. He was raised on how to be brave, just to see the flag still wave, and then he came home with only one hand. 'Cause Mr. Red, White, and Blue, lay down here the line. Mr. Red, White, and Blue, for these stars and stripes.
And we are back talking with Corey Jones from Safeyman Company. And so let me ask you, so how did you get involved in all the de-escalation and like conceal carry and all the things that your company encompasses? Was that just years of working as a police officer? Did you have additional training when you got out of the police force? All of the above?
Oh, first, yes, all the above, but let me go back. Your initial assessment is 100% accurate. While I was in the police department, my cousin, who was my mentor, like I had indicated before, told me Never say no when they ask someone to volunteer for something, even if you don't think that it's a school or training or something that could benefit you that you think. Trust me, the fact that you say yes, the fact that you go do it, you do a good job, and then incorporate it into the agency's mission is definitely going to pay dividends down the road. So by doing that, one, my agency said, all right, he'll say yes if we need him to go do something that benefits us. So then later, when I started to have my interests, whether it be firearm instructor, defensive tactics instructor, SWAT team, public information officer, what have you, because I did those things earlier on in my career, they were much more receptive to allow me to go to those trainings and schools to be able to do that. And then I made a lot of contacts when I was there, and I kept in touch with those contacts. And I became relatively good and respected throughout the county as an instructor as new things happened. So, it's not a fun topic to talk about active shooter. But once that Columbine event happened and I was on the SWAT team, we realized we didn't have an answer based on our current training for an active shooter. At that point, SWAT really stand for sit, wait, and talk. We didn't have those dynamic entries that you're seeing on TV now. And our job as the tactical team, and I mean the tactical team commander in Burlington County, was to help create a response for SWAT, push that down to patrol, and then eventually incorporate our partners such as schools, houses of worship, and educational institutions, and ultimately all businesses that wanted it to be able to train them. So then after I retired, I formed the company Safeyman Consulting with the idea of doing that active shooter training to make people safe. And then that just blossomed now from there. So, being in the military, you're aware, you have to have a crisis management plan. Active shooter plan is a part of that. But what I realized by teaching active shooter plans to companies, they have a national company that has locations, both retail and corporate locations in about 16 states. And during the pandemic, just before the pandemic, like Victor, January, February of 2020, when we all kind of thought something was going on, but we didn't exactly know yet. I was in the midst of training this client, an active shooter. And then once the pandemic went full on, obviously before Zoom, the training kind of stopped. But they realized and made it very clear to me that my active shooter training really was crisis management training, and really helped them mitigate the potential negatives of having a decentralized mission, something, distributed domains and distributed command and distributed missions that you're doing in the military. We realized that we needed to be able to do that in private sector as well. So by teaching them communication, by teaching them having a centralized location where you have in a digital cloud everybody's contact information, you could push out timely, accurate, actionable information to New Jersey, to Pennsylvania, to Florida. And if you remember during the pandemic, there's different levels of what they wanted us to do during the lockdowns, and it made their job a lot easier, which then further encouraged me to make sure I expand my active shooter training to say any kind of adverse, traumatic, unexpected emergency.
So what would you say, how important is it for, churches, daycares, schools, private citizens in their own home? How important is preparing and practicing for active shooter incidents?
Well, if you don't have a plan, you'll revert back to craziness and something that is just not going to work. Just look at Uvalde.
Yeah.
They supposedly had active shooter training. They had, 50, 20, 100 people there standing there with full weapons, body armor, and you would think training to go into that line of fire, put yourself between the bad guy and the innocent, at this point, children, and they've refused to do it. It took one agency, BORTAC, to go in and say, we got this. And as soon as they entered, they immediately identified the shooter and stopped the shooter. And if you don't have a plan and you don't train and you don't have a leader who's aggressive and is going to tell you to do that, you're going to fail. So tabletop exercises, real world exercises, and then reinforcing what's going on, putting that into a policy, incorporating train the trainer within the agencies that you're training, or the businesses or the houses of worship, or the medical institutions that you're training, we need to give them the ability to kind of flex the basic training and the in-depth training I give them, but really make it fit their mission, their team, their clients, and their physical location. So I think it's of ultimate importance.
And what is the thing that you are busiest with your company? Is it the concealed carry training, the de-escalation, or the active shooter?
It kind of, the headlines drive that, believe it or
Right.
not.
I'm sure, yeah,
During the pandemic, I was really big on, because we all discovered, at least I discovered Zoom about
yeah.
about 2 weeks into the lockdowns. I didn't know what it was, right? But since I couldn't do in-person training, I was doing active or de-escalation training, because you go into a store and you weren't wearing a mask, and that team member, that team member and client interaction sometimes did not go well. So my
Yeah.
job was to train them to be polite, be direct, give the reasons why this needs to happen, and this is of utmost important. You have to know when it's time to act, and I had to give them that. So by knowing when it's time to act, you have to know something. You'd understand the rules of engagement. That doesn't translate very well to the private sector, but when you explain it properly, you ask, you tell, you make them do it, because safety is paramount.
Yeah, I'm surprised I didn't get arrested during the pandemic, because I was like arguing with people. Like, I was so aggravated with the whole gloves mask situation. I was just like, what? Oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm really surprised that nobody called the cops on me, because I was in a few people's faces because I was just irate and stressed out. And, as somebody who was on the front line of the pandemic, I was just,
Oh yeah.
it
Yeah,
was
and again, I want to
time for
commend
sure.
you again on that. I want to commend you again on what you did, both in the military and in your private field as a medical professional. You were at the forefront. Of anybody in America, the medical profession was at the forefront. So thank
Yeah,
you
it
for
was,
that.
thank you. It was a challenging time for sure. What are some common de-escalation techniques that work well, like in any type of setting?
One is confidence in your mission. So we have to know exactly what our goals are. And the problem is, some people, depending on the personality, I give the acronym of Q-tip, quit taking it personally. So the most important thing I tell is, don't take it personally. When I showed up in uniform, when you show up in uniform, whether it be the greens or the white in the medical profession, people aren't mad at you, or people aren't arguing with you necessarily, unless you have no bedside manner, right?
Right.
Unless you're unprofessional. But generally, they're upset with the policy or the direction or the mission or the order or the restriction. And we have to be able to figure out a way to, it's not me, don't take it personally. And then second, that confidence that your mission is righteous, and that's a lowercase r, I'm not getting religious, but righteous, meaning that it is, at least as we believe it, the best mission to keep everybody safe. And then number two, you have to have the confidence that your administration is going to support you in your decision when you're enforcing those regulations, whether it be state, local, federal, or just at your specific jurisdiction. And then finally, we have to have the competence to be able to enforce those rules effectively. And sometimes you have to enforce them strongly. And what I'm seeing in especially in law enforcement is we're lacking the competence and the confidence. So these situations that you're watching on social media or watching on the local or national news or the legacy media, is you're seeing especially first responders hesitating to enforce the law when they need to enforce it. And by doing that, it allows the subject that you're dealing with to become more irate and less rational, and potentially even formulate a plan to attack, escape, destroy evidence, or just drive on. And then we are also human beings, and we're subject to those same emotions, and then we can overreact or underreact or don't react. So we have to get out of paralysis by analysis. We have to have a command staff, a leadership that is training us and is both codifying and writing and continually reinforcing, through briefings, through meetings, through publications, through training, what the rules are, what they want us to do, and that they will back us. So that confidence competence cycle is self-perpetuating. If we don't have that, we're almost destined to fail.
Yeah, I agree with you. And knowledge is power. Like when we were when we were growing up, knowledge is, and knowing, being educated on, de-escalation techniques, being educated on just basic gun safety. I mean, I know when my son was little, before I ever even had a gun in my home, he still knew gun safety because I didn't know whose home he was going to be going into and were they proper gun owners. So he knew from this, finger, don't point it at anything that you don't intend to kill, know what's behind you, keep your booger picker off the bang switch, and treat everything as if it was loaded. The basic things. And, and obviously the laws are going to differ depending on what state you're in. And, of course, I left New Jersey and then they changed the law that you can conceal carry. And I was like, of course, I'm leaving it now.
Yeah. Now I can do it.
Now I can do it. But one of the things that was in the news a few years ago, I can't remember exactly how long ago it was, but there was a young woman who was going after another young woman with a knife, and the cops had to shoot her because she was going after this other woman. And the women on The View were talking about this incident, and God help me, I cannot stand that show. And Joy Behar is like my mortal enemy. Because she's like, why didn't he just fire a warning shot into the air? And I'm like, oh my God, because you have to know where it's going to land. And if you don't know where it's going, like, you can't just shoot it up in the air. Like,
no.
This
isn't in a sandbox. Like when you guys go into the sandbox, or you guys go into a foreign location and you're trying to enforce the law, you're trying to enforce a barricade or a stop where vehicles approaching have to stop. Warning shots are quite often done. That's part of your rules of engagement. But in the United States, first off, they're not effective in the United States. And second, they're dangerous because, as you indicated clearly, we have to know where that bullet's going to land. They don't just go up in the air and disappear. And finally, it's illegal in New Jersey. Warning shots are patently illegal in the state of New Jersey. So for all those reasons, that this just insane, and it's just not effective. I know the case you're talking about. I was actually on a one or two podcasts actually speaking about that. And I hate to go off on a tangent, but the media has a narrative, so they're going to paint that story in a way that supports their narrative that law enforcement is insensitive, law enforcement is untrained. And it's our fault that these two young ladies were acting out of control, and one was putting another in great danger, serious bodily harm, or death. Yeah,
it's just kind of a shame. But people just I feel that pandemic kind of ruined a lot of social grace, and social media has been a large contributor to that, and we've kind of lost that ability to just treat each other with grace and with kindness and objectivity. If you tell me a story, I'm like, okay, I want to talk to the other person, and I want to hear both sides of the story. Even I do feel like the news doesn't give us the whole picture, and unless you're even some of these like high profile cases that are out there, like George Floyd and Lori Vallow and all these other cases that are out there. Like, if you're not in the courtroom listening to and hearing all the evidence that's being presented, I have a hard time passing judgment because, I'm only getting one side of the story. And I sure as heck am not taking, forming an opinion based on what's coming out of the media's mouth, because they've kind of shown that we really can't always trust everything that they're saying. I like to do my own research. I'm a nurse. That's where that comes from too.
Well, that's great. And I hope you echo that message. And I hope everybody listening writes that down, is you can't believe exactly what you hear on the media. And one thing my dad taught me is, we all know that this media outlet is different than this media outlet. Their lean is towards one side and the other one is towards the other side. But my dad taught me, don't just follow one. Listen to them all, and then you can make a little bit more educated decision when you do that.
Exactly. We're going to take a quick break, and when we're going to come back, we're going to talk about some more gun safety and rideshare safety.
Got it.
see the spray painted stop sign when I roll down 79. The drag marks behind that mini mart ain't faded after all this time. Every mad guy from Georgia to California's got a boy with a rebel heart. Stories in every small town scar left by a good old boy taking it way too far. Somebody had to drink too much and crank Hank way too loud. Somebody had to always stand up to the guy with a tendency to run his mouth. The straight pipe Chevy had to run these streets like Bo and Luke in the General Lee. Yeah, somebody had to, and that somebody was me. There's still ruts on Ridge Hill Road, and muddy cans we tossed out the window. String bikini on a limb by a swimming hole, that's a story that'll never be told. Cigarette butts in a busted bottle sitting by that old burn pile. This town was nothing without us, tearing it up every once in a while. Somebody had to drink too much and crank Hank way too loud. Somebody had to always stand up to the guy with a tendency to run his mouth. The straight pipe Chevy had to run these streets like Bo and Luke in the General Lee. Yeah, somebody had to, and that somebody was me. Yeah, somebody had to get a 4.0, full ride, whole life planned out on track. Somebody had to make a touchdown pass when state front page name written in black. But somebody had to drink too much and crank Hank way too loud. Somebody had to always stand up to the guy with a tendency to run his mouth. The straight pipe Chevy had to run these streets like Bo and Luke in the General Lee. Yeah, somebody had to, and that somebody was me. Yeah, that somebody was me.
And we are back talking with Corey Jones from Safeyman Consulting. So before the break, we were talking about the escalation, and then we started to move into gun safety. So obviously, when it comes to gun safety, the basic rules never change. Obviously, you need to know the laws for your particular state that you live in. My husband is super happy that we live in Florida because he has a suppressor nowadays. Oh, God bless him.
He's lucky. I'm jealous.
I think he loves that suppressor more than he loves me.
Yeah, well, it's probably a close second, but yeah.
But so when it comes to gun safety, so for me as a woman, I will say when it came to, I never fired a weapon until I joined the military. And that's when I was said, oh, no wonder why people do this all the time. This is really fun. But
Yeah.
I was also terrified because I had never been exposed to it. And I knew growing up that my father had a gun. I never knew where it was, but I was told if you ever find it, don't touch it. I was like, okay. So I never went looking for it. I never touched it.
Right.
But when I had my son, like I said, I wanted to make sure he knew the rules. And once he was old enough and I started training, when he's a teenager, we got him the training. So training is very important, first and foremost, so that you know how to handle it, how to use it, and you are safe. And I don't know why people still clean their guns while they're loaded. I will never, ever understand that. But for me, I always, go to a store, put them in your hand so that you can, because they're not one size fits all for sure.
No.
So picking caliber, picking, home defense, concealed carry. What do you tell people when they say, hey, I want to learn to shoot?
Exactly what you just alluded to. I asked them what their goal is. What are you trying to accomplish? Do you want it for fun? Are you just a gun collector? Did you pick this gun, this Desert Eagle 50 caliber gold-plated gun because you saw it on TV? Are you a collector? All those are fine reasons. I just tailor my training and my advice to them to what their goal is. Now, obviously, I'm safety man. My job is to make sure you're safe, legal, and effective with your ability to defend yourself, your family, and any innocent third person you endeavor to protect. But I also want people to enjoy it. I want people to be safe. So once I do that initial interview for a prospective client, find out why do you want it, what's your experience, do you understand the law, do you know anybody who's been in a self-defense shooting? And then once I get that, is your family on board? How old are your kids? What's your situation? How are you going to carry it? Where are you going to store it? And all those different things. Then I develop a plan for safety. So the first thing I do is interview them and find out what their objectives are. Then I develop a training plan with them, not for them, but with them, to make sure that they're safe, legal, and effective with the firearm or firearms of their choice, to A, have fun with it, B, make sure it's safe, and then C, make sure that they can use it in an effective manner to defend themselves or anybody else.
And where do you typically do your, like, do you have a range that you use to do your lessons at?
Yeah, there's a range called Ready, Aim, Fire. It's just across the bridge in Bristol. I've been training with them since just before the pandemic. In fact, I remember going with no masks, and then I remember a week later we were wearing masks at the gun range. And you're in the military, you always wear your eye protection when you're shooting. So now imagine wearing a mask with eye protection. What do you think happens? It's always fogging up on you, right? So, my clients would complain. I said, listen, we're training for worst case scenario. This is simulating you wake up at 2 a.m. and you couldn't put your glasses on. How are we going to identify a threat? How are we going to make an accurate shot? How am I going to know where my tap rack ready and where I'm going to do my reloads are? So it's adding that additional stress where it's a little bit harder to breathe, simulating being out of breath because that adrenaline jump, a little bit harder to see, simulating low light, no light, or you not have your vision corrected, and still being able to be safe, legal, and effective with that firearm. So that's one of the things that I really stress. So, and then if I need to go outdoor, if we're doing long weapons, shotguns, sniper rifles, or something that's on the M4 AR-15 variant, then I have ranges that I go to called USANA, which is down in Cumberland County, South Jersey. And, I'm really good acquaintances with the owner. So he gives me a private 100-yard range where it's really only about 4 lanes. So it's just enough for my shooter or shooters and I. And it's giant cinder blocks protecting us from the other range. So I feel safe, and then we can get that good training done. So those are the 2 ranges that I use about 90% of the time. But I'll go anywhere as long as the client's range allows outside instructors to come in.
Yeah, I've been down to USANA a few times. I enjoy that range. I mean, we had a couple options in New Jersey. We have some options down here now in Florida. I'm, just being in the military and having been deployed, indoor ranges for me are really hard. So I really prefer to be outside.
Yeah.
My husband's gearing up to go to the range. I think in another couple months, he wants to certify on the long range. There is definitely a difference for people who have never fired before between a bolt action and a semi-auto. And my husband's got one that's like a freaking cannon. I'm like, I can't even be around him when he shoots because it's so loud.
Yeah. It'll make your eyebrows grow. It's so loud.
It's too loud. And I'm such a girly girl sometimes. I'm like, oh, this gun is pretty. He's like, yeah, but do you like how it fires? That Desert Eagle is so obnoxious looking. Like, I can't even.
Yeah, I mean, you know what they say about a guy who goes out and buy a gun that's dead giant. I'll let you figure it out, but
yeah. So now when it comes to, so we've talked about gun safety, and that's one way to protect yourself if you are in a state that allows for that. So what are some things that you can do to protect yourself if you are in a state that doesn't allow for that? And like, let's say you're taking, you're getting in your Lyft or your Uber to go out with your friends, or taking a ride to the airport and it's 4 a.m. What are some things that we need to be looking for or doing to make sure that we're ensuring our safety?
Well, most of those ride shares have very good in-app built-in safety features. I was on, I think I was on Fox News Philadelphia about a unfortunate event where a young lady got into a fake ride share, was taken out, assaulted, and then killed. And since then, most of the larger rideshare apps have included emergency buttons, sharing your location and your journey with your friends. a lot of your drivers will have in-car cameras that both show the front and the back. I give people lots of tips. One, they tell you the make, model, color, and license plate number and name of your driver, so you can confirm that. There can be code words. If your driver comes up and says your name, that's also good. And you say the driver's name, and then I fake. When I'm walking up into my Uber, I'll be on the phone and say, "Hey, yeah, Bill's here with the car. He's got an awesome car. He's got a gray Nissan Sentra, the same one we were looking at. Bill seems like he's pretty cool. He reminds me of Charlton Heston or whatever like that." And when your driver hears that and hears that you're up on point, looking at him, shaking his hand, "Thank you for taking me home. This is just my, boyfriend. He's just coming home from an MMA fight. He's going to meet me where we're going." It's all the bluff. And then you
Right.
read their reaction to you being so, prepared. That's going to be somebody's going to pick you, not you, but pick somebody else who's a softer target. So the same thing you do as a military when you go someplace, not really shock and awe. I mean, that may be overplayed, but just showing that you have my two favorite words, situational awareness. If it looks funny, if it sounds funny, cancel the ride. You may lose a point on, your rating with that rideshare app, but I'd rather lose a point and be a 4.9 as a 5.0 and be safe and alive.
No, I travel a lot and I've used Uber and Lyft, and I actually should probably, when we're done tonight, I think I'm going to go on to the apps and look for that safety emergency feature, because I don't think I've noticed it. If it's there, I probably should acquaint myself with that button, because, in the event I ever do need it. But I do tell people, like, "Hey, I'm getting in the Uber," or whatever. And I do the same thing, but not everybody does that. And I've seen too many people now, like their head is down, they're in their phone, like they're not even paying attention to what's going on around them. And I'm like,
yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy.
I know.
Yeah,
It's situational awareness. If we could give you one bit of advice tonight, everyone, it's situational awareness, I think, is probably one of the best things that we could give you. So let me ask you another question. After all your years in law enforcement, and we've talked about how things have changed, in healthcare and law enforcement, did they ever give you any kind of support or training in terms of like taking care of yourself and like mental health resources and things of that nature? Because I know in nursing, we kind of started talking about it after the pandemic, and now it's kind of like everybody's kind of forgotten about it again. And the rates of PTSD in nursing is about 29%, and law enforcement is about 19%. So did you receive any of that? And if you didn't, where do you know of, like, what recommendations do you have for those in law enforcement and healthcare today where they could find resources if needed?
I'm so glad you asked that question. I'm very passionate about that. And I was involved in a major incident. I don't really like talking about it, not because it causes me any problem, but the person involved, was a political figure. That person suffered some, downfall from that. I like to tell the second half of the story in case people, can put two and two together and figure out who that was. But that person is 100%, I don't even want to say rehabilitated. He was a great person who just had a bad day, right? But that weighed on me because it was such a high profile case, and the type of evidence we had was really just based on, Safetyman's training and experience. It wasn't a lot of quantifiable external information that we normally have when we're making that type of arrest. So the fact that, my faith was very helpful, some close friends were very helpful, my wife was very helpful in supporting me, and ultimately, when all the evidence came back, we won the first trial. There was an appeal, we won the appeal. And here's what I'll tell you: if you do things properly, if you do things by the book, if your lowercase and uppercase are righteous in your mission and your actions and your documentation of that, it will work out better for you. Because the Attorney General of New Jersey had to investigate this high profile incident. After that, I wound up having a TV show that you referred to earlier. That Attorney General, after he retired, came onto my TV show and talked about his company called Resilient Minds on the Front Lines. And we train resiliency to first responders, to medical professionals and nurses, especially emergency room nurses and nurses like yourself, and anybody else who's looking for it. In the middle of my show, on the commercial break, I said, I'd like to get hired by your company. And he offered me a job. And to this day, I still do that job. In fact, next week, I'm flying out to a state in the Midwest to provide more resiliency training and peer support for a state police patrol agency. They've suffered a few in the line of duty losses in that state, some traumatic incidents involving criminals where there was death of people who, every death is obviously tragic, but when you have children or elderly people that are being affected by a terrorist type event, it can affect you. Even the small things, I don't want to say a fatal accident is a small thing, but a fatal accident, some type of an egregious assault, a child dying, domestic violence, we suffer multiple adverse childhood and adverse adult events. And we're going to give you the knowledge, skills, and ability and resources to get that resiliency training and help each other and help yourself with good habits, good hygiene, good exercise, good nutrition, good sleep, good coping, talking with a peer support group to help get you to the point where you can survive that. So it was really refreshing. And this is a story I tell as often as I can, that the things you do today may not pay dividends tomorrow, but this was a full 6 years after the incident that I wound up getting this job. And I'm actually being flown out to the Midwest to do a training from that same individual who formed this international company, who is now IDLEST, AIDLEST, International something of law enforcement trainers. We actually now got that certification. I'm able to go out and spread this knowledge to help other first responders, go through their career, because suicide, as it is in the military, unfortunately, it's also pretty high in law enforcement as well. So my goal is to mitigate that. I lost a young lady on my platoon who was a friend of mine and my wife's, and just after I retired, a month after I retired, she wound up taking her own life. And I vow that doesn't happen again, because I carry some of that weight personally. I was close with her, but I didn't have anywhere that I knew of to direct her to get direct counseling that could have mitigated it.
Yeah, it's really, really important that we're, taking care of ourselves, and taking care of each other, being kinder to each other. Really an important message, because it is rough out there. And, God bless our law enforcement out there, grinding away day after day and putting themselves on the line. And, our first responders, healthcare workers, we're out there every day. And I personally feel as though there's just not enough mental health resources for the general public in and of itself. And we're just kind of spreading this pervasive, mental health struggle. And that's why we're seeing all these, increased incidents of, just all these random attacks, shootings, just violence, just kind of all around us, and so I want to thank you for bringing, what was the name of that company again?
Resilient Minds on the Front Lines is the name of the company. And, I'm a master facilitator there. And like I said, we're really big on teaching peer support. And you alluded to the fact, being forgiving of yourself. We are not perfect. We are not AI. AI is not perfect. We are not robots. We make mistakes. We're emotional. You suffer a traumatic adverse event, talk with somebody about it, assess it, find out that I can't control what that 16-year-old did or does. I can't control what that person says to me, does to me, or does after I intervene. Think about going to somebody's house to help them, leaving, and then finding out 2 days later they still took their life or committed a crime or did something negative. That's not your fault. You did the best you could with the limited time, resources, and training you had to try to mitigate or to have them change course. And sometimes there's deep-seated issues that we just can't pick up on, let alone rectify. We're police officers. We're not psychiatrists. We're not psychologists. We're not therapists. Yet we sometimes have to wear those hats temporarily when we go out to a call for service. So being not harsh on yourself is something we really talk about. My wife is a functional health coach, and that's a little bit more nutrition. It's a little bit more than exercise. It's a little bit more than diet. It's actually literally getting into positive self-talk. Your brain hears when you talk. And if you say, I'm an idiot, I'm stupid, I messed that up, your brain hears that and your body reacts in a certain way, and it can be a spiral down. So that's one of the things that she teaches as well. So it's interesting that our career paths have a lot of parallels in them.
Yeah, I appreciate all of that. It's all because it is all important, like that, that mind body connection is just so important. And, health goes along with the mind, and you have to fuel your mind and you have to fuel your body properly, and you have to take care of yourself, and we need to take care of each other. And, all great information. And I really appreciate you coming on tonight and sharing all your time and your talent with us.
It's my pleasure. I mean, if anything, if I can help one first responder, if I can help one medical professional, if I can help anybody, seek guidance, seek help, seek support. Please don't hesitate. Don't wait till it's too late. There's confidentiality attached to this. So if you contact one of our team on Resilient Minds on the front lines, that's confidential. The only time we would actually tell somebody something that you said, and it would be very limited even then, is if you obviously presented an immediate danger to yourself or some other person. Beyond that, we're going to do everything we can to support you. If there's a substance abuse problem, or if you are feeling like you may hurt yourself, we can get you placed in an institution within the day with or without insurance. So just understand that that is there.
Yeah, it's so important. And I so appreciate that. And you are on Facebook. I put your safetyman.co in the chat, and I put the Resilient Minds on the front lines in the chat as well. So if you need some de-escalation training, some concealed carry training, and you are in the Jersey, Philadelphia area, you need some resiliency training, reach out to Corey Jones at Safetyman or Resilient Minds on the front lines. Thank you so much for being on the Dog Tag Diva podcast. And I come back anytime and we'll talk about some more things.
I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you having me on. It just means a lot to get that message out there, to keep our first responders, our frontline workers, our medical professionals safe and effective, even in the light of everything we're seeing on the news where, certain aspects of the media may make you think that you're not appreciated. You are appreciated. No matter what was going on in America, we still had citizens showing up at our police station, bringing us lunch, bringing us dinner, coming in just to say thank you, driving through the neighborhood and pulling up on the little kids having a lemonade sale and buying the lemonade. The parents will come out to take the pictures with us. I was in community policing and crime prevention for a while and public information. And that was one of my jobs, to try to foster a relationship with the public in a non-adversarial kind of way.
Winning hearts and minds.
Yes.
Well, thank you again, Corey. This is the Dog Tag Diva reminding you to greet each day with purpose, passion, and tenacity, and be kind to each other.
Absolutely. Stay safe, be ready, and as always, train now.
Thank you so much, Corey.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to Military Broadcast Radio. As we wrap up today's show, we want to remind you that the podcast of today's episode will be available right after we go off the air. So if you missed any part of the show or want to listen again, be sure to check it out. And remember, we're here to support and honor our veterans. Your stories and experiences matter, and we are committed to giving you a platform to share them. That's right. We're here to give our veterans a voice. So don't forget to catch the podcast and stay connected with us. Giving our veterans a voice.